Welcome back to the deep dive. Usually when we do this, we're looking at the finished product of politics, the speeches, the laws, the press conferences, all very polished.
The official version of events. Yeah.
Exactly. But today we're going to try something a little different. We are going into the back room. We are basically transporting ourselves into those smoke-filled rooms in The Hague.
Well, let's be accurate. It's 2026. There's probably no smoke anymore.
That's a good point. It's more likely with the smell of dry cleaning, anxiety, and as we're going to find out, some very specific types of coffee.
It's a very distinct atmosphere.
Okay.
And we're looking at a really pivotal moment in Dutch politics.
Yeah.
The formation of a brand new cabinet.
And we're not just looking at, who got what job. That's the surface level stuff. We're looking at the psychological warfare that it took to get there.
The horse trading, the bluffs, the power plays.
Our source material for this is just fantastic. It's a transcript from Afhammeren in De Telegraaf. For anyone who doesn't follow the Dutch media scene closely, you should think of Afhammeren as what? The insider's diary.
That's a great way to put it. It really captures the mood when the cameras are off and the guards are down.
Yeah.
And the mood this past week, according to the source, was just heavy.
It really was. The whole piece opens with this brilliant contrast, this feeling of the Friday feeling.
Right. That feeling when you've been grinding all week and you just hit a wall of exhaustion.
Well, totally. The source even quotes this social media thing that was going around The Hague, this meme, "Captain, it's only Wednesday."
I love that. It's so visceral.
It is. It's that feeling of absolute despair, right? The negotiations are stalled, the crisis is at its peak, and you realize you're not even at the halfway point of the week.
Exactly. And then it contrasts that with the feeling at the end of the transcript, which is now is only Friday.
The relief.
The palpable relief. The puzzle pieces have finally clicked into place. The boardroom, or more specifically the boards, is actually in sight.
We should probably pause on that word for a second. The boards. For our international listeners or, anyone who hasn't memorized the layout of Dutch royal palaces, what exactly are we talking about?
The boards is really the iconic platform, usually the step to the Huis ten Bosch Palace. It's where the new cabinet stands with the king for that official photograph.
Oh, the photo op.
It's the visual finish line of this whole marathon. When you see all those politicians standing there, blinking in the sunlight, looking a bit awkward.
Trying not to stand next to someone they hate.
That too. But when you see that picture, you know the government is officially formed. The game is over for now.
So the boards is the goal. And getting there this time required some absolutely incredible maneuvering. I mean, we have so much to unpack today. We're going to look at how the VVD, that's the party that technically lost the election, somehow came out of this having completely won the negotiation.
It's a genuine case study in how to use leverage when you're not in the top spot.
And then on the flip side, we're going to look at the opposition, and specifically a total disaster class in strategy from a party called JA21.
Oh, it's painful to read. Really amateur hour stuff.
We'll also be talking about the new Prime Minister, Rob Jetten, and why his premiership is apparently being compared to a romantic drama series.
I still can't quite believe that made it into the political discourse, but honestly, it's surprisingly revealing.
And of course, we have to talk about coffee. Not just as, a beverage to keep you awake, but as a matter of what? National security? Personal survival for the new Minister of Health.
It sounds so trivial, but I promise you that one little detail tells you everything you need to know about the job she's about to take on.
All right, let's dive in then. Part 1, the VVD's masterclass in portfolio poker. I want to start with the big picture because this is where the whole story begins. The VVD is the People's Party for Freedom and Democracy. For over a decade under Mark Rutte, they were the sun in the Dutch political solar system.
Everything revolved around them. They were the natural party of government.
But in this last election, they didn't win.
No, they came in second. The PVV Geert Wilders party won the most seats, which was a shock to everyone.
So conventional wisdom in a democracy says the winner gets the spoils, or at the very least, they get to take the lead. The second place party usually has to, eat some humble pie. They have to compromise.
You'd think so. If you're the junior partner, you take the scraps that the winner leaves on the table. But the analysis from our source suggests something completely radically different happened here. The VVD didn't just get some scraps. They basically raided the kitchen.
So how is that even possible? How do you lose the election but win the formation?
To really get it, you have to look back at the previous cabinet, Rutte the Firth. In that coalition, D66 was the second biggest party behind the VVD.
Right.
And if you ask anyone in The Hague, whether they're friend or foe of D66, they will tell you that the coalition agreement for Route the Fourth was essentially a D66 party manifesto with a VVD cover sheet.
So D66 punched way above their weight.
Oh, massively. They dictated the climate policy, the nitrogen policy, the whole social liberal tone of the government. And the source makes it clear. The VVD hated it. They spent years feeling like they were just executing someone else's agenda.
They felt trapped.
They felt completely paralyzed. They couldn't get anything done for their own voters. And that frustration is, the real reason why they eventually pulled the plug on that cabinet over migration. They just decided they couldn't work with that group anymore.
Okay, so that sets the stage. Fast forward to today, the VVD is second again. But this time, they completely flipped the script.
100%. If you look at the portfolio distribution, who gets which ministry? The VVD has locked down ministers for basically all of their priority posts. They went into this negotiation knowing exactly what mattered to them, and they came out with it.
But they gave up the premiership. That's the big one. Rob Jetton of D66 is the prime minister. Doesn't that mean D66 won the grand prize?
That's the optical illusion. And it's a brilliant one. Yes, D66 gets the shiny title. They get the Turinche, the prime minister's little tower office. It looks great.
It's symbolic.
It's hugely symbolic. But while D66 is busy with the symbolism, the VVD has secured a cabinet with very distinct right-wing elements on the things that actually move the needle for their voters: migration policy and the economy.
Okay, this brings us to a really key metaphor the source used, which I found fascinating. The Rubicon.
Yes, this is central to their whole strategy.
So just a quick refresher for anyone who skipped history class. Crossing the Rubicon, it's Caesar. It means passing a point of no return. You're committed. The source argues the VVD had already crossed the Rubicon on these big, painful issues like nitrogen and climate. Can you unpack that?
Right. So you have to go back to the nitrogen crisis. For the last 5 years, this has been the single biggest headache in Dutch politics. It's incredibly complex. But basically, a court ruling said the Netherlands was emitting way too much nitrogen, mostly from farming and construction, and it was damaging legally protected nature areas.
And the whole country went into a kind of lockdown.
Exactly. The country was locked. You couldn't get permits to build houses. You couldn't get permits to build roads. It was an economic disaster.
And for the VVD, the party of entrepreneurs, of builders, of drivers, this was their worst nightmare.
It was an existential threat to their core identity. And in the previous cabinet, they appointed one of their own, Christiane van der Wal, to be the minister in charge of fixing it. She had the horrible job of delivering the message that the only way out was to drastically cut emissions.
Which meant shrinking the livestock industry.
Which meant telling farmers, a core part of the conservative base, that many of them had to go out of business.
It's like telling Texas to ban barbecue. It's an attack on their identity.
It caused an absolute political firestorm. Farmers were protesting, blocking highways with their tractors. Rural voters revolted and created a whole new party, the BBB, that surged in the polls. That was the Rubicon. The VVD leadership years ago made the painful calculation: we have to bite this bullet. We have to sacrifice a portion of the agricultural sector to save the construction industry and the wider economy.
So the political pain was already inflicted. The damage was done.
Precisely. And that is the absolute brilliance of their negotiation strategy this time around. When D66 came to the table and demanded strong climate goals, ambitious nitrogen targets in this new agreement, the VVD could basically just shrug and say, fine, you can have it.
Because it wasn't a new concession for them?
Not at all. They didn't have to bleed for it this time because the wound was already a scar. They had already paid the political price. So they gave D66 a win on climate, which cost the VVD nothing new. And in exchange, they said, okay, but we'll be taking defense, justice, infrastructure, and control over the big economic ministries.
And they killed the proposed tax hikes.
That was the big one. That was the line in the sand. There was a serious proposal on the table for a €5 billion increase in the tax burden on citizens and companies. For the VVD, that is absolute anathema. It's the one thing they can never, ever sell to their voters.
So they essentially traded the symbolic role of the premiership to kill a major tax hike and to make sure they had their hands on the economic engine room of the country.
That's exactly it. They're letting Rob Jetton cut the ribbons and host the foreign dignitaries while they control the nation's bank account and its borders. It's a masterclass in understanding what you actually care about versus what just looks good on television.
Let's talk about the people then. The players they've put on the board, because the personnel choices here seem just as strategic as the policies. First up, Dilan Yeşilgöz.
The leader of the VVD. And she's making a very interesting move. She's going from being the fraction leader in the House of Representatives to becoming the Minister of Defense and, crucially, the Vice Premier.
Okay, I need you to explain this for a non-Dutch political system. In the UK or the US, if your party is in government, the party leader is almost always in the government. If you win, you're the prime minister or a senior secretary. Why is it a big deal here that she's leaving the parliament?
It's because of the Dutch tradition of dualism. The idea is that Parliament and the government are two separate entities, and Parliament's job is to control the government.
To keep them in check.
Right. And traditionally, especially within the VVD, the rule, which was literally written down in their famous Liberal Manifesto of 2005, was that the party leader stays in the chamber to be the chief controller, to keep their own ministers on a tight leash. The only exception is if they become prime minister themselves.
So if you're not the PM, you stay in parliament to steer the ship from the outside.
Correct. So by joining the cabinet as a regular minister, even a very senior one, she is technically making herself subordinate to the parliament she used to lead. She's giving up her seat, her vote, her direct power in the chamber.
So why do it? Why break with that long-standing tradition?
The source is pretty blunt about it. Because she's tired.
Just tired.
The source uses this wonderful phrase. It says the last 2 years have been tropical years for her.
Tropical years. I love that. It immediately paints a picture of intense heat, sweat, humidity, exhaustion.
It implies a pressure cooker. And you have to think about her job as fraction leader. She had to manage this incredibly fractured parliament. Day in, day out, she's in meetings dealing with Geert Wilders screaming from the right, Peter Omtzigt giving these long, detailed lectures from the center, Caroline van der Plas wheeling and dealing for the farmers.
A nightmare of personality management.
Completely. The source describes those meetings with the other faction leaders as heaven-storming in their level of annoyance. She felt like a kindergarten teacher trying to wrangle a class during a riot.
So she prefers the executive role.
The source says she feels like a fish in the water as a minister. She gets to be in charge. She can give orders, make policy, travel internationally for defense meetings. It's a different world from sitting in the chamber until 2 in the morning arguing about procedural motions.
So she's trading that day-to-day parliamentary influence for, what, sanity? Or maybe a different, more global kind of influence?
I think she sees defense as a truly heavyweight post, especially now. With the war in Ukraine, with the focus on NATO spending, the Minister of Defense is a major player on the world stage. It elevates her above the petty squabbles of domestic politics.
Right, but if the general leads the battlefield of the parliament, you have to leave someone in command of the troops.
And that someone is Ruben Brekelmans.
The new fraction leader. Now, the source had a very specific, and I have to say slightly petty detail about him, something about his coat.
Chuckles, yes. Apparently, during the long formation talks, which stretched through the winter, Brekelmans was frequently seen wearing this one specific winter coat.
His signature coat.
It became his signature coat. And the insiders in the media started making jokes about it. The source just writes, okay, we know it now. The winter's over. We know the coat.
It's amazing how those little visual details can just stick to a politician in The Hague.
It humanizes them, I guess, but it also diminishes them a tiny bit.
Look, Brekelmans has a massive job now. He is taking over the steering wheel of the entire VVD parliamentary party.
And this is a really dangerous dynamic, isn't it? He has to lead the VVD faction, which means his job is to profile the party. He has to go out there and show the voters, hey, we are still the VVD, we are still a right-wing party. But his own party leader, Yeşilgöz, is sitting in the cabinet he's supposed to be holding to account.
It's an impossible tightrope. If he attacks the cabinet's policies too hard, he's attacking his own boss. He could cause a crisis. But if he's too soft, if he's just a cheerleader for the government, then the VVD voters will think the party has lost its identity, that it's just been absorbed by this D66-led coalition.
He has to bark at the opposition, but not actually bite the hand that feeds him.
Perfectly put. He needs to cause just enough trouble to look distinct without causing any actual trouble. It's a very fine line to walk.
And the source notes that Brekelmans is a career politician. The line they use is, if the party calls, you serve. Yes. There's a very strong culture, especially in the VVD, but in other Dutch parties too, of service. You don't get to pick and choose your job. When the leadership asks you to step up, you say yes.
And there's a cautionary tale mentioned about a man named Wim van de Donk.
Yeah, this is a fascinating piece of insider history.
I wasn't familiar with this story at all. What happened there?
This was back in the Ruud III era. Wim van de Donk was a very prominent Christian Democrat, the King's Commissioner of the province of Brabant. a real big shot. Sabra Mbuma, who was the CDA leader at the time, asked him to become the Minister of Justice.
Yeah.
A huge, powerful role.
And he said no.
He turned it down. And Buma was apparently furious. He felt it was a betrayal of the party. And the result was that Van de Donk was effectively blacklisted from national politics after that. He was put on the do not call list.
Wow.
So Brekelmans knows this history. He knows that when the call comes to lead the faction, even if you secretly think you'd prefer a nice, safe ministry somewhere, you salute and you take the job. You don't say no.
Speaking of safe ministries versus very, very dangerous ones, let's talk about Sophie Hermans.
To me, this is the most fascinating and telling appointment of the whole lot.
Sophie Hermans is moving to VWS, the Ministry of Health, Welfare, and Sport.
Which is known in The Hague as a killer ministry.
Why is it a killer? What makes it so dangerous?
Because it just consumes ministers. First of all, it's the largest single budget in the entire government. It's immense. Second, it affects every single citizen in the country in a very intimate way. And third, it's an absolute minefield of powerful conflicting interests. You've got the doctors' lobby, the hospitals, the massive insurance companies, patient advocacy groups, the pharmaceutical giants.
And they all want more money, and they all hate each other.
Precisely. It's a constant, brutal battle, and Hermans is willingly walking into this. A lot of people expected her to stay in a background role or maybe take a lighter portfolio. So why health?
The source says it's because her superpower is invisibility.
Yes.
I need you to explain that, because normally in politics, the goal is to be seen. You want to be on TV.
Not if you're a true operator. Sophie Hermans is described by the source as an absolute master of the backroom. Her real effectiveness comes when nobody is watching. She understands how to manage the lobbies. She knows how to massage the egos of difficult senators. She knows how to work the system from the inside.
So her job at Health isn't really about giving speeches on healthcare reform.
No. Her job is to pre-cook the policy.
Pre-cook, like in a kitchen.
It's a great term for it.
Yeah.
In Dutch consensus politics, the last thing you want is a big, ugly, unpredictable fight on the floor of the parliament where the cameras are rolling. You want to win the fight before it even starts.
So what does she do?
She calls the opposition parties, GroenLinks, the Labour Party, the SGP, into a private room days before the public debate. And she says, okay, look at this new law on elderly care. I know you don't like all of it. What do you need to be able to support this? You want a bit more money for youth mental health? Fine, we can do that. You want a small tweak to the rules for in-home nursing? Done.
So she makes a deal behind closed doors.
Exactly. So by the time the actual debate happens on television, it's all just theater. The deal is already done. She's the director of that theater, making sure everyone knows their lines. That's why they put her in health. It doesn't need a grand visionary right now. It needs a master deal maker.
But the job comes at a cost, a physical cost. And this brings us to the coffee.
Chuckles. The coffee anecdote. It's so good.
I genuinely love this detail. The source says that Sophie Hermans has been officially advised to switch from drinking Nespresso to drinking filter coffee.
Yes.
When I first read that, my first thought was, is this some kind of austerity measure? Is the national budget so bad they can't afford the little aluminum pods anymore?
No, it's not financial. It's a medical intervention.
A medical intervention. Explain the science here.
Okay, so it's all about a substance called cafestol. Cafestol is a lipid, basically a fatty substance that's naturally found in coffee beans. When you drink espresso, or coffee from a French press, or from an espresso machine, that oil stays in the final drink. And it's been shown to significantly raise your LDL cholesterol, the bad cholesterol.
Okay, so unfiltered coffee is bad for your cholesterol.
Right. But, and this is the key, if you brew coffee using a paper filter, the paper is fine enough that it actually catches most of the cafestol. It takes it out of the coffee. So filter coffee is much more heart healthy.
So what does this have to do with Sophie Hermans?
The experts, presumably at the ministry, have calculated that the Minister of Health has to sit through so many mind-numbingly long meetings, drinking so many cups of coffee just to stay awake and function, that if she drank unfiltered Nespresso all day, she would literally give herself heart disease from the sheer volume of cafestol she'd be consuming.
That is one of the most terrifying metaphors for a political workload I have ever heard. Your job is so stressful, you will drink so much coffee that the specific brewing method will determine your long-term survival.
It just visceralizes the sheer physical endurance the job requires. It's not just an intellectual challenge, it's a marathon of caffeine, stress, and cholesterol management.
Now, contrast that with another PvdA appointment, Vincent Karaman's. He's going to infrastructure.
The safe bet.
Why is infrastructure considered safe? I mean, I feel like if a bridge collapses or the trains stop running, that's a huge scandal.
It is, but the timeline is completely different. Think about it this way. If you are the Minister of Justice and a dangerous criminal escapes from a psychiatric facility, a TBS patient, that's a headline tonight. The minister is on TV tonight fending off calls for their resignation.
It's immediate, high-stakes accountability.
Exactly. But infrastructure, that's the long game. If you approve a new highway today, it won't be finished for 10 years. If a project goes wildly over budget, the parliamentary inquiry report won't come out until 2032.
So Keremans gets to cut ribbons and wear a hard hat, and most of the potential problems will land on some future minister's desk.
That's the logic. And the source points out that Keremans is a local politician from Rotterdam. He doesn't have national parliamentary experience. He doesn't know all the tricks and traps of a debate in the House. Throwing him into a killer ministry like justice or health would be throwing him to the wolves. Infrastructure lets him build a national profile safely.
It really does seem like the VVD has thought this through on every level. Every piece is on the board for a very specific reason.
It's a masterclass in political personnel management. They've put their best operator in the most difficult job, their best talker in the parliamentary leadership, and their newcomer in the safest spot.
Okay, so that's the VVD. They've played their hand brilliantly. But we have a new prime minister, and he's not from their party. Rob Jetten, the leader of D66.
The first D66 prime minister in Dutch history. It's a huge moment for his party.
And he's a man who has carried a very specific nickname for years. Climate drummer.
Which translates roughly as climate nag or climate pusher.
The source really leans into the irony here. The man who was relentlessly mocked by the right-wing press for years for obsessing over heat pumps and solar panels is now the leader of the entire country.
It's a remarkable political transformation. But frankly, the source also suggests it might be a bit of a poison chalice for him. He has the title, he has the office, but does he really have the power, with the VVD controlling all those key ministries?
Let's look at his first big performance as prime minister in waiting. He had to go head-to-head with Geert Wilders in a debate almost immediately.
Yes. And Wilders did what Wilders always does. He went straight for the throat. He tried to frame Jetten as fundamentally illegitimate. His whole argument was, you didn't win the election, I did. You are an illegitimate prime minister sitting in what should be my chair.
A very direct attack on his democratic mandate. How did Jetten handle it?
The source says it wasn't a cat in the bag, which is a Dutch expression, meaning it wasn't an easy win. He really had to work for it. But he bit back, and he bit back hard. He turned to Wilders and said, if anyone here isn't democratic, it's you.
A direct reference to the fact that the PVV, Wilders Party, has only one official member.
Exactly. Geert Wilders is the only legal member of his own party, a structure he created to ensure he has total, absolute control. Jetten used that to flip the script on him. I come from a party with thousands of members who vote on our platform. You run a dictatorship of one. Don't lecture me on democracy.
So he showed he's not a pushover.
He showed he's not going to crumble. The expert analysis in the source notes that he's still clearly searching for the right tone, that sort of father of the nation gravitas that a prime minister needs, but he proved he won't be bullied.
Now, this is where the story takes a weird turn. We have to talk about the first husband.
Yes, this is where high politics collides with pop culture in a very 2026 way.
So Rob Jetten is openly gay. He has a partner. And his partner, in an interview, apparently compared their new life, or maybe their relationship dynamic, to a TV series called Heat Rivalry.
Chuckles.
So,
I admit I had to look this one up. It's not on my usual watch list.
please explain Heat Rivalry to the listeners, because I'm guessing it's not on the standard political science syllabus.
It appears to be a romantic drama, very much in the genre of something like Red, White, and Royal Blue. The source describes it with these key visuals: ice hockey pitches, falling into each other's arms, coming out of the closet.
So we're talking high drama, high romance, probably some sports montages, and a healthy dose of steaminess.
The source uses the very polite Dutch phrasing, calling it a family film, not for the whole family, which is a very delicate way of saying it's sexy.
So why on earth does this matter? Why are we talking about a fictional hockey romance and a deep dive about the Dutch government?
Because of what it represents as a cultural shift. Think about the previous prime minister, Mark Rutte, for over a decade.
Yeah.
What was his public image?
A bachelor, famously single, ate an apple every day, cycled to work on an old bike alone. His personal life was a complete black box.
He was a political monk. He was the CEO of Netherlands Inc. It was sterile. It was safe. It was boring in a way. Now you have Rob Jetten, who is young, openly gay, whose partner is referencing steamy TV shows. He's bringing a kind of modern celebrity energy to the tour engine.
It's the Netflix-ification of the premiership.
That's a perfect way to put it. And it will be really fascinating to see how the more conservative parts of the country react to that very different style over time. It's a huge change.
Before we leave D66, we need to touch on one other key figure, Hans Veilbrief. He's slated to go to social affairs.
Veilbrief is a real heavyweight, a former top civil servant, very experienced. He was the state secretary who was put in charge of handling the Groningen gas crisis.
And he was quite popular there, wasn't he? He was seen as the guy who finally listened to the victims.
He was. But the source raises a really sharp and critical point about why he was popular. In Groningen, his job was to fix a historic injustice. The government had pumped gas for decades, caused earthquakes, and ruined people's homes and lives. Veilbrief's job was to show up with a giant government checkbook and say, "We were wrong. I am so sorry. Here is a lot of money to fix your house."
It's a lot easier to be popular when your job is to hand out cash and apologize.
Well, it was by no means an easy job. The anger and trauma there are incredibly deep, but he always had the moral high ground and, crucially, the financial resources. He was the good guy from The Hague fighting the slow, cold bureaucracy.
And now he's going to social affairs.
And social affairs is a completely different ballgame. It's where the feel-good stories often go to die. It's the ministry where you have to make the hard decisions. Do you raise the minimum wage? And if so, how do you pay for it? Do you have to explain why certain benefits are being cut? You have to deal with unemployment, with poverty. Your job is very often to say no.
You don't have a checkbook full of compensation money. You have a very strict budget cap.
Exactly. And the source raises a very valid question.
Yeah.
Has Hans Veilbrief ever had to face true political headwinds? How will he perform when he has to deliver bad news to a hostile public, when he can't solve the problem by just writing a bigger check? It's a completely different psychological and political game.
That's a really good point. Okay, let's pivot. Let's move to part 3, the opposition. Because if the VVD played a masterclass in poker, the opposition... Well, they seem to have been playing Go Fish.
It really was a comedy of errors, especially on the right.
Let's start on the left, though. Jesse Klaver, the leader of the combined GroenLinks-PvdA faction. The new cabinet isn't even officially sworn in yet, and he decides to make a big move.
He tried to pull a power move. He introduced a motion about the AOW, the state pension age. He wanted to force a vote to block the planned automatic rise in the retirement age.
Why do that so early? What was the strategic goal?
The source calls it scoreboard politics. He knew he didn't have the votes to actually pass it. He hasn't seen the cabinet's detailed budget plans yet. He has no idea what the financial reality is, but he wanted to force a vote anyway.
Just wanted to get everyone on the record.
He wanted to crown himself king of the opposition right out of the gate. He wanted to stand up in the chamber and make the new coalition partners, the VVD and the others, vote against freezing the pension age. Then he could run out and make a TikTok video saying, "See? This new right-wing cabinet hates the elderly."
It's a political trap.
It's a classic trap. But it seems to have backfired. It was seen as so transparently cynical, so performative, that even some of his own allies were publicly annoyed. The source mentions Sharon Dijksma, a very prominent Labour Party mayor, who criticized the tone. She basically said, you need to have a real plan in your back pocket, not just stand there shouting demands.
So Klaver ended up looking a bit silly, a bit premature. But he wasn't the biggest loser of the week. That dubious honor, according to our source, goes to JA21.
This is the one that has all the analysts in The Hague just scratching their heads. It's truly baffling.
So remind everyone who JA21 is.
They're a right-wing party that split off from the more radical Forum for Democracy a few years ago. Their whole brand, their whole reason for being is that they are the decent right. They're conservative, but they're constructive and serious. Not chaotic populists like Wilders, not racist, just solid, fiscally responsible conservative policy.
Okay, so logically you'd think they would be, if not a friend, then at least a potential constructive partner for this new, more right-leaning cabinet.
You would absolutely think so. They could be the go-to party when the coalition needs an extra vote on a right-wing issue. But in this vote on the pension age, JA21 voted with Jesse Klaver.
Wait. The fiscally conservative Decent Right Party voted with the Green Left Socialist Bloc on a major economic issue.
Yes, they supported the left-wing motion.
Why on earth would they do that?
That is the million-dollar question. It makes zero sense on any level. First of all, as the source points out, it directly contradicts their own election program. JA21's official published stance is that the retirement age must rise with life expectancy to keep the pension system affordable. They are fiscal hawks.
So they literally voted against their own stated principles.
Yes, but even worse was the strategy, or the lack of it. Strategically, it was political suicide. They are a small right-wing party. Their natural allies in the chamber are the VVD and the PVV. By siding with the left in the very first skirmish of this new parliament, they sent a giant flashing signal to the new cabinet that said, "We are not your friends. We are totally unreliable."
They burned the bridge before they even had a chance to walk across it.
Completely. They threw away any chance of being seen as a constructive partner. And the source attributes this massive blunder to a very simple, very human factor. The teacher was away.
You mean Joost Eertmans, their leader?
It's exactly. Joost Eertmans, the leader and the main strategist of JA21, was out sick that day. He's the experienced hand. Without him there, the faction was being led by Annabel Naninga. And the suggestion is that without Eertmans' steady strategic influence, they just fell into a knee-jerk oppositional reflex. They just wanted to kick the new government for the sake of kicking them, completely forgetting that they actually agreed with the government's underlying policy.
A total own goal. Amateur hour.
Complete amateur hour.
But here's the incredible twist in the story. While JA21, the established party, was busy shooting themselves in the foot, a tiny splinter group, usually the very definition of political chaos, emerged as the strategic geniuses of the week. The group Markuszower.
This is my absolute favorite subplot of the whole formation drama. It's perfect.
Petey Markuszower. He was a controversial figure who got kicked out of the PVV, or left, depending on which side you ask. He formed his own little one-man group. Usually these splinter groups are just noisy and irrelevant before they fade away.
Usually. But in that crucial vote on the pension motion, Markuszower voted against the motion. He voted with a new coalition. He effectively helped save the new cabinet from a very embarrassing early defeat.
So why would he do that? Is he suddenly a huge fan of Rob Jetten and the D66 climate agenda?
No. He is a huge fan of continuing to receive a paycheck.
Whoops. That's a cynical take, but probably true.
Look, think about it from his perspective. He just started this new political group. He has no party structure. He has no local branches, no paying members, no donor network, no campaign war chest, nothing. If this new cabinet falls next week and there's a snap election,
He's toast. He's completely wiped out.
he is gone. He has no chance of getting reelected on his own. He needs time. He desperately needs this cabinet to survive for 2, 3, maybe even 4 years. That gives him the breathing room he needs to build a brand, print membership cards, find some donors, and actually build a party that could survive an election.
So he is acting as a pillar of stability for the government, not because he believes in their program, but because he needs them to survive so that he can survive politically.
It is the purest form of political self-preservation. And it has led to this beautifully ironic situation where the stability of the new Dutch government currently rests on the shoulders of a terrified splinter group that is more scared of an election than anyone else.
That is 4D chess played out of pure desperation.
And it showed more political insight in that one vote than the entire JA21 faction did all week.
Let's move on to part 4. The Christian Democrats, the CDA. After a terrible election result, they've clawed their way back into the government.
They are. And they've put forward a secret weapon, a man named Bart van den Brink.
The new Minister for Asylum and Migration.
Correct.
Now, I feel like I follow Dutch politics pretty closely, but I have to admit, I don't know much about him. He's not a household name.
And that is entirely by design. He's the ultimate fixer. He's been a member of parliament for a while, but his real power comes from his previous career. For years, he was the political assistant to all the CDA heavyweights. Maxime Verhagen, Sybrand Buma, Hugo de Jonge.
He was the guy behind the guy?
He's the guy who carried the briefcase, who wrote the strategy memos, who knew where all the bodies were buried because he probably helped dig the holes.
Wow.
The source has a great line describing him as the anti-Hugo de Jonge.
Right. We have to explain the Hugo de Jonge shoes.
So Hugo de Jonge, the former health minister from the CDA, was famous for his incredibly flamboyant shoes. He'd wear these bright floral patterns, leopard prints, shiny patent leather. He loved the camera. He loved the attention.
Van den Brink.
The source says he's justed, neat, conservative suits, quiet, efficient. No floral shoes. He is a safe pair of hands for the new, young CDA leader Henri Bonnebal. His job is to come in, keep his head down, and execute the migration deal that's been agreed. Specifically, the so-called Faber laws.
What are the Faber laws?
These are a package of very strict asylum measures named after the previous minister from the PZV. D66 ideologically hates them. But as part of the coalition deal, they agreed to let them pass the House as long as there was a majority, even without their support.
And this is where the new drama comes in, the Senate.
The first chamber, yes. This is the potential banana peel.
There was a report in the newspaper Trow suggesting that the CDA's own Senate faction might rebel, that some of the Christian Democrat senators might vote against these asylum laws because they find them too harsh, too un-Christian even.
And this is the sort of Damocles hanging over the new cabinet. Because if the CDA Senate faction votes no, the law fails. If the law fails, the core migration deal between the VVD and D66 collapses. And if that deal collapses, the entire cabinet falls.
But the expert analysis in our source basically says, everybody relax.
The expert says this rumor is massively overblown. And the logic is simple. Why would they do it? The CDA is, at its heart, a party of power and administration. They just suffered a historic defeat and have clawed their way back into the cabinet. They have their own man, Van den Brink, in the very ministry responsible for executing this policy.
They're not going to blow up their own government on day one.
It would be an act of spectacular political suicide. Can you imagine the CDA senators publicly humiliating their own new minister and their own new party leader just to make a moral point? The CDA is far too disciplined for that. The Senate faction is, if anything, more conservative and pragmatic than the party's base. The source predicts they will grumble, they will make some speeches about their concerns, but at the end of the day, they will fall in line and they will vote yes.
Okay, finally, part 5. The elephant in the room. Or maybe the elephant who's been pushed out of the room, Geert Wilders.
The man who won the most votes in the election but is not the prime minister.
The source has a great title for this section, The Diminishing Spotlight.
And it was a really painful week for Wilders, by all accounts. There was one specific incident involving the NOS, the main public broadcaster, who was just brutal.
What happened?
Wilders was in the chamber giving a speech, doing his usual thing, and the NOS just cut away. They stopped their live broadcast of his speech and went to something else.
That would have been unthinkable 6 months ago.
Absolutely not. When he was the winner of the election, the kingmaker in the formation, every single word was broadcast live. Every cough was analyzed. But now, he's not the PM, he's not a minister, he's just a member of parliament. A very loud one, but ultimately just one of 150.
He lost the power of the live feed.
He lost the power of the media interruption, and you could see him trying to get it back. Later in the week, he introduced a motion of no confidence.
Against who?
Against the new cabinet.
But the new cabinet hadn't been sworn in yet.
Exactly. It was a motion of no confidence against a government that didn't legally exist yet. It was a ghost motion.
And how did the rest of the chamber react to that?
They laughed at him. There was audible laughter in the chamber.
Ouch. That's kind of hurt.
For a populist strongman like Wilders, being hated is fine, being feared is great, but being laughed at, that is absolute kryptonite. It makes you look weak. It makes you look desperate and a bit ridiculous.
So is that it for Wilders? Is his moment over? Is he just going to fade away?
The expert in the source gives a very, very stern warning here. Absolutely not. Do not make that mistake. Never underestimate Geert Wilders.
So he's just in a temporary valley of relevance.
He is in the valley right now, yes. He's on the outside looking in, but he is waiting. He is patiently waiting. He knows this cabinet is a fragile, experimental construction. He knows that Rob Jetton's D66 and the VVD will eventually clash over something fundamental. He knows the migration crisis isn't magically solved overnight.
He's waiting for the inevitable crisis to hit.
Yes, and when that first big scandal hits, when the first major promise is broken, when the public gets angry about something, Wilders will be right there. He is the undisputed master of the angry one-liner. He will be there to channel all that public anger and say, I told you so. This is what happens when you let them steal my victory.
So let's try to wrap this all up. What we have is a new cabinet where D66 holds the symbolic top job, the premiership, but the VVD holds all the strategic keys to the kingdom.
A heat rivalry premiership, but with a VVD engine room running the whole ship.
We have an opposition that is completely fracturing between the scoreboard politics of the left, the amateur blunders of JA21, and the bizarre survival tactics of a tiny splinter group.
And a CDA that is quietly and very boringly getting back to the business of administration.
The source ended with a final poignant mention of the swan song of Dick Scoof.
The outgoing technocratic prime minister.
Yeah.
He's exiting the stage. The transition is now complete.
The old guard is gone. We are officially in the era of filter coffee, famous winter coats, and ice hockey romances.
It is going to be a fascinating, messy, and probably very, very caffeinated few years in Dutch politics.
Well, here's a final thought to leave you with. In this new landscape, where the stability of the government depends on a splinter group's fear of elections, and where the former climate nag is now prime minister, how long before that heat rivalry turns from a pop culture joke into a real, full-blown political divorce?
That is the question, isn't it?
Thanks for listening to The Deep Dive. We'll catch you next time.